I think teenagers probably have trouble ever imagining anything but immortality for themselves. They seem to believe that they're indestructible. I mean, I was the same way. I guess all teenagers are. They believe that, I guess, nothing could ever happen to them. But when you wake up one morning and realize that you're on death row and you're waiting there day after day for them to set you an execution date, it's a pretty hard reality check. It's I think you realize it's a pretty harsh world.
We're just about out of time, and I'm wondering if there's anything that you want to say or you want to talk about that I haven't asked you about.
Not that I can think of.
Pardon me?
Not that I can think of. No.
Okay. If you could go back to your life before the trial and change anything, would you?
I wouldn't change anything that's ever happened in my entire life. Nothing. Everything that has happened in my life has came together to create and make me the person that I am now. And if any of those things were changed, then the person who I now am would not exist. I wouldn't think the same way about things. I wouldn't feel the same way about things. So there's no.
But the person that you are today is sitting on death row. You wouldn't want to change that?
I don't think there was anything I could do to change that. What was it? I mean, become a clone, give up my personality, give up my identity, just march along like everyone else. I'd rather die first.
The little boys were found in a drainage ditch, 8-year-olds, mutilated and beaten to death. Sickening killings that might have been part of a satanic ritual.
They loved the wood. They were wonderful children. Christopher was the shy one. Michael Moore, he was going to be a police officer. Stevie, I'm so proud of him. He was an achiever. He was a very brilliant, wonderful baby God blessed me with.
On June 6, 1993, just 1 month after the 3 8-year-old boys were found dead in the woods, there were arrests. In custody, 17-year-old Jessie Misskelley, 16-year-old Jason Baldwin, and the alleged ringleader, 18-year-old Damien Echols.
Damien Echols was 19 when he first arrived on death row.
There was some guard barking at me, you know, your number is 931, remember it. And I happened to look over at the clock, and it was exactly 9:31 at night.
Echols and 2 other boys were just teenagers when they were convicted for the 1993 murders of 3 second-grade boys in West Memphis, Arkansas.
We, the jury, find Damien Echols guilty of capital murder in the death of Stevie Branch.
Echols was sentenced to death. He's on death row at the Varner unit of the Supermax State Prison Facility in Grady, Arkansas. His cell isn't much bigger than where we did the interview.
Your bed is a concrete slab that's on the wall, pretty much like this table is. It's just a concrete slab that you get a little plastic mat to put over. The shower is a faucet on the wall. There's a drain in the floor where the water goes through. There's another concrete slab that serves as a sort of table.
Any reaction to the conviction, Damien?
Since the verdicts, questions have loomed about whether justice was served. Documentaries and books have made the case Echols and the two other boys, dubbed the West Memphis Three, were wrongfully convicted. A number of musicians and actors have rallied around the West Memphis Three, including Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder, who regularly visits Echols. Echols doesn't like to talk about celebrities, citing their privacy.
When Eddie comes here, we'll sit here and we're talking about baseball and we're eating M&Ms. You don't equate that with the person you hear come on the radio sometimes.
Another visitor who he sees every week is his wife, Lori Davis. Davis started writing him letters after seeing a documentary about the murders. They got married 15 years ago in the only Buddhist ceremony in the prison.
Whenever you're married to someone out there, you have a lot of things that you take for granted. Things like physical intimacy, things like coming home to the person you're married to every night. You don't have that in a situation like this, so it forces you to grow together psychologically and emotionally. You have to find other means of connecting, other ways of being together.
Echols also has a son by a teenage girlfriend. He visits him on death row. He's almost the exact age Echols was when he was arrested for the murders.
It's one of those things that you wrestle with, just trying to figure out where did all this time go? You know, what happened? It's crazy. It's crazy.
Echols, who's actually from Marion, Arkansas, not West Memphis, says he considers Memphis, Tennessee home and remembers watching local TV stations.
When did Channel 13 become Fox?
That was 1995. Echols said us being there, a Memphis TV station, brought back many memories.
I miss that stuff so much, like the way every year they would do, you know, every 2 seconds on TV the commercials would come on for Memphis in May. You have no idea how much stupid things like that mean to you, or things that annoy the hell out of you. You know, just the fact that you had to see it 1 billion times a day back then, you know, until it's gone, and then how much nostalgia is connected to stuff like that. You know, you can't even imagine it.
Echols has missed the 21st century.
Have you seen a laptop before?
On TV. I've never seen one like this.
Echols has a TV in his cell, no cable. He's never seen the internet or used a cell phone.
In a way, I'm glad I missed a lot of that stuff, the computer stuff, the Facebook and, you know, all that sort of stuff, because now I don't really have an interest in it, and it seems to be the thing that consumes most people's lives.
Echols reads thousands of books.
People think that I'm probably obsessed, sitting around thinking about the fact that I'm in prison all the time, and I'm not really. I have things that I work on.
He says he studies herbs, natural healing, and meditation.
One of the things that's been extremely therapeutic for me, and that it's allowed me to survive in here through all these years, is my spiritual practice.
Death row inmates are allowed to go into a caged area outside for an hour each day. Echols declines, saying the area is filthy.
So you don't go outside at all?
Oh, no. I haven't had sunlight in probably about 7 years.
Echols says he lives off M&Ms and chips, which inmates are allowed to buy. He can't stomach what he calls gloth. Inmates at Varner get fried chicken periodically on the days executions take place.
I've lost count. There's been somewhere between 25 and 30 people executed in the time I've been here.
What is that day like for you when someone's executed?
Extremely bizarre and surreal. You know, it's weird, the things that stick out in your mind, but for example, the only time you ever have fried chicken in prison is whenever they execute someone. And I haven't figured out if that's to pacify you or if it's almost like a taunt or something, you know, I don't know.
In Arkansas, the death penalty is administered by lethal injection. Echols says he's seen the death house, but only on TV.
Do you think about the day that you're scheduled to die?
No. You know, when they train race car drivers, they tell them, don't look at the wall. Look at the track. Look at the other cars. Look inside your car. Don't look at the wall. Because if you look at the wall, sooner or later you're going to plow into it. Whatever you look at, that's the direction your life is going to go in. That's the direction your energy is going to pull you in. So no, I don't think about that because I don't want to hit the wall.
Defense attorneys say DNA recently tested shows no trace of Echols or the other two defendants at the crime scene. Earlier this month, the Arkansas Supreme Court ordered a new hearing for the West Memphis Three. Next month, Echols turns 36 years old.
It's about to be 2011. It seems like just yesterday that I turned on the TV and saw these festivities for the new millennium, you know, where it's turning 2000. And I'm thinking, how did more than a decade pass already? It just passed around me, and I'm still sitting here.
Injection of a lethal quantity into your body until you are dead.
You're familiar with a fellow named Aleister Crowley?
I know
Heard
who
of
he
him?
is. I know
Okay.
who he is.
And he's a guy who kindly professes, he's a noted author in the field of satanic worship, right?
I know he is, but I've never saw any of his books personally.
Okay. Not really much of a follower of his?
I would have read them if I would have saw him, but I just
Okay.
never.
Okay. But Aleister Crowley is a guy that, based on his writings, believes in human sacrifice, doesn't he?
He also believed he was God, though. So.
A body language expert is weighing in on what convicted killer Damien Echols was really saying when he talked with Fox 13 last week. In a jailhouse interview, Echols spoke with us about death row, his new hearing, and where he was the night 3 West Memphis boys were murdered. That was back in 1993. Fox 13's Jill Monier has the details of what kind of signals his body language was sending. Jill, this is very interesting to me.
It was interesting to hear this expert talk with us today. Damien Echols and the rest of the West Memphis Three have claimed for years they didn't kill the boys. We interviewed Echols for more than an hour last week at the Varner Maximum Security Prison in Grady, Arkansas. That's where he's on death row. And the expert we spoke with today says his body language speaks volumes.
Go back a little bit and let's look at his facial expression.
Marty Miller has been reading body language for more than 3 decades.
Yeah, be right here. Now, yeah, go a little bit more.
First as a police officer, now as a private investigator.
Now go back a little bit further.
Miller knows little about the West Memphis Three case. We asked her to look at our hour-long interview with convicted killer Damien Echols. She immediately notices the change in Echols' personality from when we were casually talking to when the official interview begins.
He moves his head up like this, and then he smiles and does that with his face. He really enjoys it. Now, you're fixed to ask him a serious question, I can tell just by the way he's looking. I don't know what you're going to ask him, but now the concern comes in. See, did you see how his forehead wrinkled up and his hands came into him like this? Now he's rubbing his nose. He's insecure.
Miller hits on more when I asked if Echols knew the children who died.
I'd never even seen these children before.
Can you go back just a second? Watch his lips. See that? See the face? We need to watch that face. See if he does that again.
I asked Echols about the night the 3 children were murdered in West Memphis.
Where were you at the time?
You see the discomfort?
The time that they say the murders happened, I was on the phone with 3 different people.
He gets uncomfortable at times on certain questions that you're asking him. He's surprised you know as much about it as you do.
Miller says Echols gets very uncomfortable when I ask him to view video we brought with us from his 1994 trial.
You see the discomfort in his face? You see how hard he swallowed? And that same movement on his lips happened again.
We move on to the new evidentiary hearing the Supreme Court granted Echols and the West Memphis Three earlier this month.
Some big developments in your case.
Okay, now he's sad. Now he's very sad. You see the way his mouth is now, the words are now almost round, like before you cry, you know how you're like, he has a lot of emotions, and you know, he has a right to have a lot of emotions. So reading his body language, you're going to get several different things. He's upset, he's unhappy, he feels like he has been, there we go again with that hard swallow and the lips going sideways. When he does that lip movement, it looks to me as if that's a disgusted movement. He's disgusted with the whole thing. He's disgusted with what happened. He's disgusted with what people blame him for. Each time he does that, he's talking about some aspect of that case.
How confident are you that you'll get a new trial, or are you?
I'm absolutely 100% confident that...
Okay, now watch his eyes. Over here to the left, he does this. He goes, I'm 100% confident. No, you're not. If you're 100% confident, you're going to be looking at you saying, I'm 100% confident. I think he believes that he's going to get another trial, and I think it kind of makes him nervous, but I also think he only thinks 50%. He does not trust the system. He doesn't trust himself. He's uncomfortable about speaking about the trial. He's uncomfortable about speaking about his emotions. Each time you go into something in that area, it's automatically the hand goes over the mouth or the fingers cross. You know when you were a kid and your mom go, no, or shh. It's the same reaction. He just, you know, does not want to speak.
So you just heard a little bit about how he reacted when I was asking him about the case itself. But tonight at 10, hear more about Echols' emotions during the interview and what Miller's overall observation of him is. We'll have both stories online at myfoxmemphis.com. Merle?
And I don't suppose I can get you to tell me exactly what she thinks, can I?
Well, you know, she says that she didn't see a lot of lies, particularly when he was talking about the case, but she says he's been on death row for 20 years, and who knows what you can convince yourself of with being on death row for that long.
No question about that. Now, what other she talked about the body language and the facial expressions. Are there other ways that you can tell when a person is lying?
She said your nose itches when you lie, and that a person can never lie with both feet on the ground.
Well,
always moving on.
Well, in our case, we always have one foot up because there's a pedal. Okay, so now he kept looking at one of the photographers. You were telling us about that during the interview. What was that about?
Our photographer, Clint Gyros, in fact, he was looking at him so much that Marty Miller asked if he had ever met Damien Echols before. He kept looking for him for assurance every time I would ask him a tough question. And she couldn't figure out if it was because maybe they were the same age or that he was maybe envious that he was on the outside world, but he definitely kept looking at him for assurance, reassurance, and she said that's something that's very important to Damien Echols.
And going back to something you just said, is there ever a time when the body language expert would have trouble pinning someone down? Because we were all taken aback by how straightforward and thoughtful his answers were to every question.
Right, and it's a case like this because he has been on death row for so long and he's had a lot of time to think about answers and has done a lot of interviews with various news organizations, so.
And she mentioned, just real quickly, because I'm so interested in this, she mentioned that, he kind of likes the spotlight, and yet, he has said, I just don't want to talk about the stars or call their names or anything. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and we were asking him about that too, and I asked him about Johnny Depp visiting, and you'll have to see his reaction coming up at 10. It's very interesting. You won't want to miss it.
Okay, I won't miss it. Thank you so much. Jill Monier is live in our studio.
Alistair Crowley doesn't have any particular significance to you?
I know who he is. I've read a little bit about him, but I've never read anything by him.
Let me show you copy of some documents. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Okay. What is that?
It was this paper I had on different alphabets for like translations where you could write things that nobody could read, and this was one of the forms.
Oh, okay. Well, where did you have that at? When did you do that? Write those things out?
Sometime before I was arrested, I guess.
Okay. Are you sure that you hadn't done those since you were arrested while you've been staying in jail?
Damien Echols has spent his entire adult life on death row. He's about to turn 36 years old.
This is basically a storehouse where they hold you until they get ready to kill you.
Echols was 19 when he and 2 other boys were convicted for killing 3 West Memphis second graders in 1993. The second graders, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch, were found naked and hogtied in a West Memphis ditch. Prosecutors say the murders were part of a satanic ritual.
You had nothing to do with any of this?
Absolutely nothing.
Echols and 16-year-old Jason Baldwin denied involvement, but 17-year-old Jessie Misskelley, who was described as borderline mentally retarded, confessed and later recanted his statement. Defense attorneys claim the confessions were coerced.
He couldn't even get a single detail of the crime right. They would ask him things like, well, what time did this happen? He says, 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, they knew that was a lie. They knew it wasn't true because the kids were in school at 8 o'clock in the morning. They didn't care.
Baldwin and Misskelley were sentenced to life in prison. Echols was sentenced to die by lethal injection. We showed him the clips from his arrest and trial on a computer, something he hasn't seen since he was in junior high.
Have you seen a laptop before?
On TV.
When you see that clip of you in court, you're kind of sitting back in your chair like that. What were you thinking then? Do you remember that day very clearly?
That particular day, no. I mean, you're talking about something that's almost 20 years ago. It's really hard to watch stuff like that for me. You're scared to death, you're angry, and you're numb all at the same time. You know, people ask me a lot of things like, why did you act the way you did? Why did you say this? Why did you not say this? Why did you do that? Why did you not do that? And the answer is, in part, I was a kid. Not only was I a child, but I was going through more trauma than most people will ever be able to comprehend in their entire lives.
Echols says he did not know the three victims. He claims he was home when the boys were killed. His mother backs up the claim.
I was on the time that they say the murders happened. I was on the phone with 3 different people. You know, the attorneys that I had were so incompetent, it boggles the imagination. You know, I asked them, why aren't you going to call these people up on the stand so that they can testify that they were on the phone with me? And they would say, we don't need them. You know, the state's case is so weak and ridiculous as it is, there's no point in even wasting time on this.
Echols' new attorneys say those witnesses will be called during a new evidentiary hearing the Arkansas Supreme Court granted earlier this month. In the ruling handed down November 4th, justices said any and all evidence will be considered. Claims of juror misconduct will be addressed. Echols' attorneys also plan to present new DNA evidence, saying none of it matches the 3 men convicted.
There's a lot more that hasn't come out yet that I can't talk about. I'm absolutely 100% confident that whenever they see the stuff that we have now, there'll be a new trial.
The murder of Michael Moore, committed by Damien Echols, was committed in an especially cruel or depraved manner.
Echols says he's looking forward to the new hearing.
It's that feeling of finally being able to say, see, I told you. This is what I've been trying to tell you. But it's also, there's a nerve-wracking aspect to it of just, you know, having to go through this again. So it's kind of a mixed bag, I guess.
What do you say to people who think that you are guilty and that you are in the very place that you should be?
All I would do is ask them, take a few minutes to educate themselves on the case. You know, probably what they've heard are rumors, ghost stories, you know, whatever it is that gets passed around out there. If they actually took even half an hour, 30 minutes, to look at the evidence of this case, what was and was not introduced there, what, you know, what was said, what the experts said, what the new evidence is now, then I don't think they'll feel that way anymore.
If a judge finds a jury could acquit based on the new evidence, the 3 will get a new trial.
If you get a new trial, that could set you free.
Right.
Have you really thought about that?
I try to. But like I say, I've been locked up for almost 20 years now. So in a lot of ways, it's impossible for me to even imagine what that means now. You know, like I said, it's a different world out there now. I'd never even seen the internet before. So to walk out these gates now would be like walking into a science fiction novel in a lot of ways for me.
Sometime before I was arrested, I guess.
Okay. Are you sure that you hadn't done those since you were arrested while you've been staying in jail?
I don't know, I might have.
Well, whose names are written on that document?
Mine, Jason's, my son's, one that says Alistair Crowley, and...
Wait, who?
Alistair Crowley.
Now, this is a document that you've written while you've been waiting in jail for trial, right?
If you say so.
Well, you wrote it, correct? That's your writing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You recall when you wrote it?
Not really.
Well, what I'm going to ask you is that this Damien Seth Azariah Echols, your son, he wasn't born until after you were placed in jail, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if you've got his name listed on this document, then this document had to be generated after he was born, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is something you've written since you've been sitting in here in jail waiting for trial.
Yes.
And what you were doing was writing out various names in different type alphabets, correct?
From the way it looks here, I was practicing, trying to memorize them.
Okay. And one of the names that you picked out to write about was this fellow named Alistair Kraut, correct?
You have 3 children that are murdered. I mean, that in itself is a pretty horrific thing. And then slowly details start coming out about how they were found. Now, a lot of these details weren't true. Then you start hearing all these, people whispering about maybe it was Satanists that did this.
That theory did not seem so far-fetched back then.
In every state in the nation, authorities are investigating satanic activity.
A media-fueled hysteria about satanic cults was sweeping across the country.
It's the practice of evil. It exists, and it's flourishing.
An FBI investigation found no such satanic murders. But in 1993, West Memphis juvenile officer Jerry Driver was concerned about cult activity.
Seems to be a trend right now.
And he had Damien, an 18-year-old dropout, in his sights.
I was the closest thing he could come to conceiving of what he thought a Satanist would look like. All black was the only thing I ever wore. Ridiculous hairstyles. I was a stupid teenager. I really was a smartass.
Damien, you didn't help yourself too much.
Oh, I didn't help myself at all.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just a total coincidence? You just pulled his name out of the air?
No, it's just the same book that I had with the different alphabets in it. It also had stuff about him in it.
Well, did you have the book out there at the time you were doing this?
This was just from what I remembered myself, where I was practicing, trying to memorize, get it all in my head perfect.
So you were going over it, working on it in your head, and at that point in time, you write all this down from memory?
Mm-hmm.
The people that are listed on here, you've got your name on here, right? Mm-hmm. And then Jason Baldwin, which is your best friend, right? And then you've got Damien Seth Azariah Echols. That's your son?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then the only other name on this document, besides yourself, your best friend, and your son.
In 1993, a hideous crime took place in West Memphis, Arkansas. 3 8-year-old boys were stripped naked, hogtied, mutilated, and murdered. Within weeks, 3 local teens were picked up and charged with their murder. One of the 3 was Damien Echols, an 18-year-old from a broken family who had been in and out of jail and mental institutions. Echols and his 2 friends were all convicted and, in Echols' case, sentenced to death. But years later, new DNA tests revealed an unidentified person at the crime scene. While the 3 men were never exonerated, the DNA tests led to their release in 2011. Now Damien Echols lives in Salem and has a new book, Life After Death, and Damien Echols is here. Welcome. We were just talking about the Tsarnaev case and the death penalty, and one of the things you say in your book is the difference between life in prison and the death penalty is notoriety and the amount of attention. This case, your case got, I remember it exactly. I remember where I was when I first read the story 20 years ago this summer. Do you think that's the reason you got the death penalty?
It was. The local media in Arkansas had inflamed the public to such a degree that by the time we walked into the courtroom, the jury saw the trial as pretty much a formality they had to get through in order to sentence me to death.
And you were tried separately from the other 2?
I was tried with Jason Baldwin.
Mm-hmm. While you weren't exonerated, do you feel that you've been exonerated in a sense, that through this, the fact that there was something else found at the scene, that I know you feel that you are innocent, but do you feel you are exonerated?
In a certain sense, I think in a public sense, since I've been out, I can't even count how many people have come up to me and said, I'm sorry for what you went through, I'm glad you're out. But in a legal sense, we still have this black cloud hanging over our heads. We had to take this thing called an Alford plea.
Alford.
I had never even heard of it before
No.
it came up in our case. What it means is you're maintaining your innocence, but you're accepting the guilty plea that they're offering you. So what it allowed the state of Arkansas to do, to this day, in the entire history of the state of Arkansas, they've never exonerated anyone. They still maintain in the briefs that the Attorney General's office files that they have never so much as sentenced an innocent person to prison in the state of Arkansas. This plea allowed them to maintain that.
A large part of the book is about your childhood growing up, and you know, I don't know how to characterize it. It wasn't great. You had a terrible relationship with an abusive stepfather. You didn't have a great relationship with either one of your parents. Your mother was kind of in and out of your life. I mean, by the time you were picked up, did you, and you'd been in and out of mental institutions, so he had already accused you of, you know, practicing satanic things and stuff. Did you feel like you were going to be targeted, or did it come as a surprise to you when you were picked up?
Oh, I knew I was. I'd been harassed by the police department for probably 2 years before these murders ever even happened. So whenever they started coming to my house about this, I thought it was just more of the same. We had in Arkansas what they call, it was some sort of, they styled themselves as an occult task force. These people who believed that Satanists were responsible for pretty much every single thing that went on in the state. These were the people who had targeted me based on the books I read, based on the clothes I wore, based on the music I listened to. So whenever they showed up at the house and started questioning me about these murders, I actually thought it's just more of the same. Sooner or later, they're actually going to figure this out once they do some actual police work, and then they'll go away and leave me alone. I had no idea it was going to go to the extent that it did.
Did you ever practice any of those things?
No. I don't think, you know, they used to, these people were slightly unhinged in a way. They actually would go through our neighborhood and show people Polaroids of animals that were obviously roadkill, like possums that had been hit by cars, and they would say, this is proof that there's been some sort of animal sacrifices going on. What do you know about this? Eventually, the guys that were responsible for this, one of them went to prison in Florida for stealing from the police department. One of them was forced to resign after he was caught molesting a teenage boy, and one of them was shot and killed.
So describe death row. I know you've done it in the book, and I read it, but one thing I found fascinating, the three of you were convicted. Those two, they get life in prison, so they go through this kind of process where they get mentally evaluated, and they're in a place for like 3 years. You go straight to prison.
I walked out of the courtroom and straight into a cell on death row where I spent most of the next 20 years. You're in solitary confinement. At first I wasn't. I was in solitary confinement for about the last decade that I was there. They just
You went to a different prison.
Exactly. They decided they were going to ship everyone on death row to a different prison, and for the last decade before I got out, I was in solitary confinement. They say you're allowed, that you're in your cell for 23 hours a day. You're taken out for 1 hour, but out, what that actually means is they take you out of your cell and put you in another cell. I wasn't exposed to sunlight in almost 10 years. It's part of what destroyed my vision. I had next to no human contact for almost 10 years other than with guards who wanted to hurt me. So coming back out into the world, into mainstream society, you know, people just think you're going to be happy and excited that you're out of prison, and you are, but at the same time there is an incredible amount of anxiety and stress and fear that goes along with it, that it takes a long time to work your way through.
You said that the guards destroyed a lot of your notes because you kept journals. You said that was very cathartic for you. How in the world did you recall the detail, the names, the prison nicknames, the people who you said harassed you as a child? Every interaction in your life is recreated in such vivid detail. How did you do that?
Well, actually what happened is I started to lose my memories. You know, I'd been in prison for so long that I could remember things, for example, that when I was out, pizza had been my favorite food, but I could not actually remember what it tasted like anymore, just because it had been so long since I'd had it. And I didn't want to lose everything else. So that's why, a huge part of why I started writing, because it allowed me to relive these things in my head, to sort of engrave them into my brain. And I would write about them not just one time, but many times, over and over and over, to preserve them, and also because it allowed me to some extent to re-experience things that were dear to me, that meant something to me, other times, other places, other people, besides my life in prison. It was a huge part of what kept me sane in there.
You also had a spiritual revival through someone there, and
I did.
And you described, they said he told you got to make your prison cell a school and a monastery.
He said, you have a choice. You can turn your cell into a monastery and keep growing as a person, or you can sit in here and you can rot inside. And that's the absolute truth. There's no sort of development, no sort of momentum in there unless you create it yourself. And that person, eventually, he led in an indirect way to, over the years I received ordination in the Rinzai Zen tradition of Japanese Buddhism. It's the same tradition that used to train the samurai in ancient Japan. And that was another huge thing that helped preserve me in there.
Why do you spell magical with a K?
It differentiates it from pulling rabbits out of hats. Well, when you spell magic with a K, it's an Old English spelling. It means it's a combination of Gnostic Christianity, esoteric Judaism, and a lot of the energy work techniques associated with Taoism. That's what the K means. When you see the K, you know you're reading about a spiritual tradition. Without the K, just M-A-G-I-C, it's sleight of hand, stage magic.
You got to know, not friends with, but you got to know everybody on death row. In your prison, and then they would come and they would go. What was that like, watching somebody walk out the prison knowing that they were going to be executed? And it's firing squad in
No, it was lethal injection.
Lethal
injection, but it gets worse every single time. In the time I was there, they carried out between 25 and 30 executions. Right after I got there, they did 3 at once. And it's like every single one they do, for some reason, the horror sinks in a little deeper and a little deeper. I don't know why. I don't know why that happens, but it gets more horrific with every single execution. I always tell people, imagine where you work if one day people came in and they chose one person you work with at random and carried them out back and shot them. That's what it's like being on death row.
Were you worried? Were you scared? Were you terrified about it happening to you?
No, actually I wasn't, and the reason for that is the only thing I can compare it to is whenever they teach race car drivers how to drive, they always tell them, don't look at the wall. You know, look at your instrument panel, look at the other cars, look at the track. Because if you look at the wall, sooner or later you're going to drive into it. Well, that's how I looked at things like that, like execution, like them killing me. I didn't look at it. I didn't think about it. I would have people ask me, you know, what would your last words be? What would your last meal be? I didn't think about those things because that's not the direction I wanted my life to move in.
You met your now wife through a prison visit. She wrote to you.
We've been together for 18 years. We met in 1996 when she saw the very first documentary that had been made about the case by HBO. It was called Paradise Lost, and she lived in New York at the time. We started a correspondence, and it led to eventually her moving to Arkansas, us getting married in 1999, and she pretty much took over my legal case. She did more work than the attorneys and investigators put together. There were times we couldn't even afford to pay legal fees, and she would take out personal loans just to pay off our legal bills.
You said you weren't even allowed to touch her until the day that you were married.
The day we got married was the very first time we were allowed to physically touch.
Were you ever allowed conjugal visits?
No.
Death row, they don't. I'm surprised they actually allowed you a physical visit.
They didn't like it, but it was something that a previous warden had started who actually treated, you know, people like human beings, and after he was gone, it was hard for them to get rid of it. If not for that, we wouldn't
talk about that a little bit, because, I mean, you write pretty much the way I would expect prison to be, but a big part of it is the degradation and the humiliation and the treatment of the guards. And the way you treat each other, too. I mean, it extends to that.
You're no longer a human being when you walk in those doors. When I walked into that prison, I was no longer Damien Echols. I was SK931. They take away your name, they take away your humanity, your personality, and you become just a number in the system. It's the most brutal, barbaric conditions you can imagine. The guards would actually they would save up their money. They would put out a jar and they would put money in it so they could celebrate when the next execution was coming up. It's horrendously brutal. The thing that I always tell people now, whenever I'm talking about prison rehabilitation and reform, things like that, is the number of people, it's not just death row inmates who are subjected to those conditions. It's pretty much everybody in the prison system, at least in Arkansas. Well, the number of people that are actually going to spend the rest of their lives in prison, that are actually going to be executed, is tiny. It's a fraction. Most people that go to prison are one day going to be back out. They're going to be on the street, they're going to be in your church, in your school, in your neighborhood. So it's probably not the best idea to drive them insane before bringing them back out into the world. In the 20 years that I was in prison, I did not see one single shred of anything that could be remotely considered a rehabilitation program.
And he also said that the vast majority, anyway, you describe in detail the people around you, had either an old-fashioned term, but mental retardation or schizophrenia or some combination of both. I mean, these people didn't have your intellectual capacity.
The average IQ on death row is about 85, and the mental retardation, that's the way the law defines it. There's a very strict line. There's no gray areas. There's either a person is mentally retarded or they're not mentally retarded. If they are mentally retarded, the law says they can't be executed. If they are not, then they can be executed. They still execute people who are literally mentally retarded on a regular basis, people who are schizophrenic. The worst case in Arkansas was a guy who was guilty. He shot both of his in-laws and killed them, and then shot himself in the head trying to commit suicide. Well, he survived, but he had in essence given himself a lobotomy. When they got ready to execute this guy, they asked him, "What do you want for your last meal?" He says, "Pecan pie." He ate half of the pie. When they come to get him for the execution, he wraps the other half up and says, "I'm going to save this until after." They're executing people who don't even have the capacity to realize they're being executed.
You said, there's a couple of funny things in there. You said that the only good thing in prison are the toilets, that you can flush virtually anything down a toilet. Clothing, shoes,
Yes.
hardware.
Yes.
Why?
I have no idea. Maybe they made them that way just so that they can't be clogged up. But I have, people fish in the toilets.
Yeah,
if someone's
you got to
trying to
describe that.
Yeah, pass something from one cell to another, they can actually pull it up through toilets. I've seen an entire bed sheet be flushed down a prison toilet.
All right, and describe that scene with the mosquitoes. I think that was of all the horrors in that prison, the idea that I'd be eaten alive by mosquitoes, I have to think.
Yes, the prison there's nothing in any direction except fields, as far as you can see in the prison, so it's a breeding ground for mosquitoes, especially inside the prison in empty cells. They breed in the toilets of the empty cells. They will literally drive you insane. There were times when I could barely flex my fingers because my knuckles were just so covered in mosquito bites and my hands are swollen. They bite your eyelids, your lips. They buzz in your ears all night long to the point where the frustration is so bad you just want to cry. You give up on sleeping in an environment like that.
You said there would be whole walls covered with them.
Walls where they just nest. The entire wall will just be covered in mosquitoes.
What was it like walking out the door? I mean, you still got to be adjusting. It hasn't been that long.
I always tell people I didn't get used to being in prison in a single day, and I won't get used to being out in a single day. I've been out about 1 year and 8 months now. For the first 6 months of that, I was in a state of extreme shock and trauma. Almost 10 years in solitary confinement, and then out just the very next day out amongst humanity again. And to say it's overwhelming doesn't even come close to it. For at least 6 months, I could not do anything for myself, by myself. I was scared all the time. And then eventually I realized the only way I was going to get through that is if I sort of threw myself into everything that I was scared of. If you force yourself through things, it loses its power over you. And I was scared of things, like going to the store and, when you buy something at the grocery store, the little thing you slide your card through to pay for it. I had never seen one of those before. So just seeing that was enough to almost paralyze me with fright, not knowing how to do the simplest thing.
Computer.
I had never seen. When I got out of prison in 2011, I had not seen a computer since 1986, and back then it was basically a glorified typewriter for rich people.
What about your two co-defendants? Do you have any contact with them at all right now?
With one of them, he lives in Seattle now. He's in law school, or he's in college. He wants to eventually go to law school and be able to help people in the same situation that we were in. The thing is, he can't practice law until we're completely exonerated. The other guy only had an IQ of 68 to begin with, and then you dump all this trauma on top of that, and they've pretty much made sure he'll never live anything close to a normal life. He doesn't know anything outside of Arkansas, so he's scared to leave. But he's scared they're going to find some way to put him back in prison, so he never leaves his house. He's a complete shut-in. From what I've heard, he doesn't even have a phone. He's pretty much severed all contact with the outside world.
Do you think anyone else will ever be charged with this crime?
We're pushing. We're doing everything we can to see that it happens, but so far we've been met with just a complete refusal to look at the evidence that's been brought forward. They won't look at the DNA. They won't listen to the new eyewitnesses, because if they do, it means they're going to have to admit they made a mistake. A lot of people have built political careers for themselves off of this case, and they don't want to give that up.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, yeah, why are you living in Salem? Sorry, they were talking to me.
Because we love it.
Yeah.
Just the tolerance. Whenever I was in prison, I had a list of things that I said, if they don't kill me, I want to do these things. And number one on that list was go see a Boston Red Sox game. So I went to see a game whenever I got out, and while we were there, we came to visit Salem, and you know, there's a lot of tourist-type attractions there. You can take trolley rides and see the whole town. And my wife and I both absolutely fell in love with it.
So the witch thing had nothing to do with it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The history of it is that's what's made it such a tolerant place. It's like they've made the mistake once, and they don't want to repeat the same thing again, so it's made them a very accepting community. It's sort of like a mecca for people who practice any sort of alternative spirituality now. That thing is not only accepted, but it's embraced, it's encouraged.
Do you work now?
I do.
All right. Damien Echols, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that is it for Greater Boston. Adam Riley has a look at what's on Beat the Press tomorrow.
Emily, we've got two stories about prying eyes on this week's Beat the Press. First, the Department of Justice is snooping on phone records at the AP. And second, Bloomberg reporters are snooping on Bloomberg business clients. Plus, why you won't be seeing the Whitey Bulger trial on TV when it starts next month. That's Beat the Press tomorrow at 7.
All right, thanks, Adam. We lead you now with scenes from today at Fresh Pond in Cambridge. I'm Emily Rooney. Thanks for watching.
Back to your statement that you gave Officer Ridge. Did you tell him in that statement that you had been a member of a white witch group for 5 years?
No.
Okay.
I've never been a member of any group.
And so if he put that in his report, you're saying that's inaccurate?
Yes, I am.
He made that up?
Yes, I am.
On question number 9, how do you think the person feels that did this? The answer was probably makes them feel good, gives them power. Now, I guess Officer Ridge said that too.
No, I use common sense on that.
Okay.
If someone was doing it, then they must have wanted to. And if they were doing something they wanted to, it must have made them happy. I don't think they were doing it because someone forced them to or because they didn't want to.
Okay. So in your mind, the person that killed these 3 kids, it's common sense that killing 3 8-year-olds would make you feel good?
Whoever did it, it must have.
Okay. Did you also tell him that each person had a demonic side to them?
I believe every person has a good side and a bad side, yes.
Well, were those your words when you referred, when he's got written down here, he stated that there was no control of the demonic portion of people?
He asked me, did I think there were some people that could not control that side? I said, yes, I guess there is.
It also states that Damien stated that the younger the victim would be more innocent, and in turn more power would be given the person doing the killing.
Right.
Okay. Did you say that?
Yes.
Okay, those are your words.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pick that up when you were studying to be a Catholic?
No. I saw that on several movies, books.
Question number 11, when he asked you, how do you think they died? And its answer is mutilation, cut up all 3, heard they were in the water drowning, cut up one more than the others. Is that, again, what Officer Ridge said and you just agreed?
No, I had saw that on TV, newspapers, people talking.
And you knew it about the drowning, correct?
I knew they were in the water. I didn't know that they drowned.
And you knew that one was cut up more than the others?
He asked me, was it possible? He said, do you think one was hurt worse than the others? I said, yeah, I guess.
So again, that particular area is one of those things where Officer Ridge told you, and that wasn't your response. You just responded about the drowning and mutilation.
If he didn't get the answer he liked, he would go back and try to get me to say something else.
And it's your testimony specifically that you aren't the one who said one was cut up more than the other,
no,
that it was Officer Ridge who said that?
I agreed with him when he said that.
Okay. And if he says something different, he'd be lying about it, right? You're the one telling the truth.
I wouldn't put it past him.
This is the Crime Stopper room?
Yeah, this is it.
Oh, gosh.
Get him straight.
Where is this mystery object? Y'all got it?
It's around here too.
I can't believe you didn't make your bed up.
Did they not make your bed?
I expected you to get in the morning, make the bed up, and...
So Val tells me that y'all discovered this because of police ineptitude.
We told them that, that because of their allegations, we were going through they were going through the files, looking for some of that stuff and making sure everything was where it was supposed to be. And we pulled that out while we were going through there and were looking at it and saw those little red dots. And I said, y'all better test it.
Where was the blood, Brent?
Right there, 2 millimeters up.
They've had almost a year to investigate this case, and John Fogelman, I will tell you now, he needs to go into a new line of work. The infamous Inspector Gitchell is retiring, so John should take his position because he can solve crimes that nobody else can, because he decides, I think, let's see, murders occurred on May the 5th, 8 months later, you know, we ought to go check that lake out and find a knife.
And we'll find it in 1 hour.
And then let's say
without a metal detector.
We're in the middle of the trial, we're in the 3rd week of trial. I think I'll just go check this necklace that is not a part of evidence. We're not intending on introducing it because how can we? Because we have rested our case in chief. So we're not going to introduce it into evidence. And so he decides one night, well, I think I'll just, there's some real red specks on there. I think we'll have it tested.
After you've rested your case, you find this miraculous blood. They call the judge up and say, Judge, we need a continuance. They don't call me, they don't call Rob, they don't call Val, they don't call anybody. They just get the continuance. They call the judge. You're not even supposed to do that. Everybody's supposed to be able to do it. It's supposed to be on the record. Court reporter's supposed to take it down. They got a continuance.
Wait.
They rested their case and they get a continuance. For what?
You know, this is like, you could tell this story to someone in another state, and they would say, well, you know, what's the punchline in a macabre, pathetic situation? Where are you going with this? No one would believe this whole.
Val's already said they won't be prepared to cross-examine, and they're objecting to us putting it on and then leaving it overnight.
There's no way that you can have this gap in time. I'm gonna tell you, there's all kinds of problems, John. You got a jury, some jury members came up there this morning and don't know what they were told.
Other people called in and said don't come in because of what they heard on TV. And then Jim Taylor's telling it exactly like it is on TV.
I'd like to know where he got that.
Val said, they said, no court tomorrow, jurors, you don't come in, and then right after that.
The reason is they're waiting on further testing from genetic design as to whether or not there's blood found on a necklace worn by Damien Echols the night of his arrest that matches the victim's. Now that's somebody told him straight up.
I agree with you, but it didn't come from us. But juror kind of overhears that walking by TV or something.
Oh, sure.
And then it doesn't come back. You know, then it hurts us.
Obviously, it hurts us to even have the rumor out there. I don't know why. I just didn't know.
They ran something on one of the Memphis stations where they ran it on Channel 8.
But they didn't run.
Well, they called me and asked me 100 times to confirm or deny. And I said, well, you just ought to watch Channel 8. They seem to know what they're talking about. What difference does it make now? It's out. What difference does it make?
So, y'all waiting for a phone call?
In fact, I'm getting kind of close to 5 o'clock out there.
And it's 4:45 their time.
This is John Fogelman. Got anything to report? Something about the murder of the 3 little boys?
Yes, sir. I heard Damien Echols say that he killed the 3 boys.
Where were you? Was he saying that to you, or what were you doing?
I was walking by with my friend.
Jody, I want to direct your attention to May of 1993, after the murders of the 3 little boys. Did you have an occasion to be at the softball field and hear a comment in regard to the murder?
Yes, sir.
All right. Tell the jury first what you heard.
He said I killed the 3 little boys, and before I turn myself in, then I'm going to kill 2 more, and I already have one of them picked out.
You didn't recognize anybody else that was with him?
I saw Jason Baldwin there.
Margaret, 2 teenage girls took the stand this morning, and they said they heard Damien Echols confess to the murders of 3 8-year-old boys last May. One of the girls said she overheard Damien Echols say, I killed the 3 boys, and I'm going to kill 2 more. I already have one picked out. Later in the afternoon, when the defense began presenting its witnesses, Damien Echols himself took the stand. He said he thought the girls were lying and that they were making up those statements.
Around the concession stand, and I hear people saying, there he is, that's him.
I mean, and they're pointing at you because they think you might have had something to do with the murders.
Yeah.
Two girls who were at that softball game that Damien attended testified that they overheard him admit to the murders.
And who was Damien talking to?
All the people there.
All the people there?
I don't remember saying that at the time because to me, I didn't actually do it. So when it would have been like a joke.
Okay. Yeah. You got to go to the lab, and he says he can probably tell me. Oh, God.
Baldwin, you don't need to run for judge.
Why?
You need to take Gitchell's position. You need to be the new inspector.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I think you need to keep telling the media that because it really ought to come in court. Oh, I understand. Right. They're going to keep hounding you. Well, yeah, that's Channel 8. Now, if you could just tell them to refer all questions to us or somebody, and of course what we're going to do is say we can't comment. Okay. Oh, I understand. Okay.
No.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Got more damn evidence on my glasses.
Well, of the two DNA types, there's more on there from Damien. And on the D1S80 test, they were able to get Damien's amplified, but on the other one, all they can get is the DQ alpha, which matches Stevie and it matches Jason.
Or 10% or 11% of the population.
What's the percentage? 10 point?
11%.
11%. The question becomes now, should it go on when you got Damien's blood on it and you don't really know whose the other blood is? You can't say definitively.
I think the key fact is that there is evidence from which the jury could infer that it's Stevie's blood.
I think all they're told is it could be, all they should be told is that it is branches.
It shouldn't be any of this that it matches Jason's blood too.
I guarantee you we are not going to even suggest that that blood could be anybody else's other than Stevie's. Now, I imagine that from Val and Scott's standpoint, what they will want to do is to argue is, look, Jason and Damien are close associates, and that could be Jason's blood, and even if it said that it could be Jason's blood, that wouldn't be any evidence against Jason.
Oh, it will be, John. It will be.
Come on, John.
I don't understand. I mean, what?
The only thing I see is...
But y'all get up here and argue that.
No, we wouldn't. We'll agree not to do that.
Yeah. You'll agree that you will not argue that it could be Jason's blood.
No, we'll argue it's Stevie's blood.
Yeah. If Damien gets up and wants to start sticking it that it could be Jason's blood, that's severance issues.
Well, how does it incriminate Jason?
It incriminates him in the sense that...
It joins him at the hip.
Sure.
It's like, you know, these guys are such bosom buddies that they got blood on each other's necklaces.
Well, to say that it could be a friend of Damien, it could be somebody else's, and it just so happens that his best friend's at the same time.
That's what y'all gonna be. That's
We're not gonna argue that.
Well, sure you do.
The thing that really bothers me is that if this evidence if you'd have known about this evidence 2 months ago, and there's a better argument for severance.
Fight's gonna be right now between us. Now we're fighting now.
Now we're gonna fight each other.
We're going to be fighting them.
They're going to want to say it's Baldwin's blood.
And y'all gonna
We're going to say we don't want it to be Baldwin's blood. When they start offering evidence against us, that's what a severance is about.
See, I don't, of course, and I understand I'm looking at it from a different perspective, but I don't see that as being evidence against you.
Then you get to the overall problem, though, John, is that, you know, is this one of those kind of situations where now the blood's gone now, it's a dead issue, correct?
See, now we can't do anything with it except...
So, I mean, it seems to me like you've almost got a 403 situation and just none of it comes in because the test doesn't tell us enough. So it's definite, the blood's gone, and that's just definite finding.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, I mean,
there's nothing else.
He didn't indicate that he had.
Y'all haven't found anything else that y'all are going to pull on us tomorrow or Friday that y'all have got waiting on results on? No. Ain't gotten your magnifying glass out and found anything else, have you?
The tests they're running on this necklace, the tests are destructive. Once they run this amplification test, the blood's gone. It can't be ever tested again. We didn't even have a chance to talk to the judge before they ran this test. To say, wait a minute, Judge, you think we could go out and get an expert from another laboratory and come in and monitor the tests and make sure that they do these things? We haven't had fairness in this case from day one. We haven't had fairness in this case from the day they got a search warrant. We haven't had fairness from day one concerning the just numerous motions we filed. There hasn't been a fair day in this case.
Of course, it couldn't have been a better type necklace. What is it? That looks sort of like what the executioner carried around, doesn't it?
We all agreed to sequestering the jury if we got to go to Monday.
They've got all the evidence. The community's got all the evidence. Everything's out. Everything is out. This is the time that they are deliberating. Normally,
I would like, of course, I'd like to know too, because I'd like us to get the thing done tomorrow. I'm tired of this case.
I'm going to look at my house.
I'll see y'all tomorrow.
All right.
I think they just say it's 1 out of 11 or deal with it like that. It's still good.
Mm-hmm.